Well, I'll have to start off I hate to start off by apologizing to everyone because it almost sets a bad tone for the rest of the night. I don't have Jerry's gift of gab. I can talk to people, I can say all sorts of interesting things, and I say them, and I notice that I've done it in about a third of the time that Jerry's done it in. So, please, at any time, I encourage you to ask questions that will undoubtedly get me going off on a different topic. Please feel free. Otherwise, this is going to be a very short class. Tonight's class is out of body. The concept of going out of body in lots of people's minds is when we take some piece of ourselves and push it out of ourselves so that we are aware and can visit other places, other times, see people, see things that are going on. And by and large, that is true. What in essence we are really doing is we are pushing out our awareness of some place. And there may be some energy, part of ourselves, that is doing that. But it's when we take our sensory apparatus and we extend it beyond the center that we're aware of things here and now, and we take that center and we move it around, and therefore at the same time we move our awareness to someplace else, to outside of this room or to another place in the world entirely. A lot of people have written a lot of books about out of body and talked about different techniques, about you are going to be connected by this silver cord and you cannot sever this silver cord or you will not be able to return to your body. Once again, that is probably more limiting to most folks than it is helpful in getting them out, because it does a couple of things. One is it reinforces some connection to your corporeal body, which makes the entire process of moving your awareness someplace else that much more difficult. But also it tends to make people very afraid at the same time, because, oh my God, if I'm out and something happens to my cord, what's going to happen to me? So the technique that we will teach you tonight is more of it is out of body. However, it is less of a, let's take this thing and now move it over here so it's not here and it's now here. But let's push and expand our awareness out. You're still centered here. You haven't left anywhere. But it's your awareness that's being pushed out. It's the same thing. It really is the same thing. But it's a different way of looking at it that will enable you to do it more easily and to become comfortable with it. And once you are easily doing it and comfortable with it, then you can do whatever the heck you want to. It's once again, this is probably the wrong way to talk about it, but a way to think about it would be the training wheels version of out of body. You can do it comfortably. Yes, I'm doing very good at it. Now you can do other things, whatever the heck you want to do with it. One of the more interesting, and I think I alluded to this a little bit, uses of out of body are probably what we would consider more mundane uses. If, for example, I'll give you a situation. Say, for instance, you are having a discussion with somebody, perhaps even a disagreement, maybe even an argument. It is very, very interesting and very helpful if you take your awareness, shift it around behind them, and look at you. That is a technique that a lot of folks will teach in crisis management and conflict management and things like that. But it's an out-of-body technique. And you go around, you look from behind the person, and you see you, and you see yourself as the other person sees you. Now, unfortunately, it's very difficult to help the other person to see themselves, but at least you can see yourself. You can see what that person is seeing, what that person is experiencing, and it gives you the ability to drive a resolution faster because you have a whole lot more information than you had previously. So that's what we might consider a more mundane use, but it's very, very powerful. Once again, I mentioned that when we go out of body that we push our sensory apparatus out. You don't necessarily have to take all of them. You can leave senses behind if you wish to. A story that Jerry likes to tell that highlights this point. She had a very close friend that was doing psychic readings, or was going to be doing psychic readings for the at one of the tents at the Renaissance Festival. And this person had to dress up in period clothes, but had no idea what to wear. So she decided to go out of body, go back in time to the time of the Renaissance, figure out what people were wearing, and say, okay, this is what I need to wear. She came back and said, okay, I did that, and I figured out what I needed to wear. But unfortunately, I took my sense of smell. We're talking about a time when, the word deodorant was not even thought of. Personal hygiene was not that much. Horses were doing their thing in the middle of the street. In fact, people were taking their stuff and just tossing it right out the window because there were no sewers. So, it was a great chivalrous time, and it really smelled bad. So, the next time she went, she remembered to not take her sense of smell with her. Similarly, you could, if you wish to, you can restrict yourself to other senses. And that might have more applications than just saving your stomach, if you want to think about it that way. One of the best things, and something that I need to make absolutely positively clear, is you are taking your sensory apparatus, your perception, your brain's ability to perceive senses, touch, sight, sound, and you're moving them away. The thing is that unless you're asleep, the real thing is still working. And something that a lot of people find very challenging is you're going to be having two different perceptions at once. One is the out-of-body perception, and one is the perception that you're actually having with your eyes, ears, even your skin. So when you're learning to do out-of-body, and you want to control it, which as soon as you're asleep, you have one perception because everything else is turned off, and it's a great, powerful out-of-body experience, but after a while, you start dreaming and you lose a lot of that information. The thing that you need to do is put yourself in a situation where you can turn off as much as possible. Put yourself in a very, very dark room. Unplug the phones. Make sure that you're home alone. If you're not home alone, make sure that nobody's going to come bother you. Take off as much clothing as you feel comfortable doing. You're attempting to just remove as much of the present, here, now sensory input as possible to make it easier to make this more strong. So turning off or not sending certain senses makes it a little bit easier because you're not having to reconcile two different sets of experiences at once. That causes a problem for some people in that when they're going out of body, because they have these two different experiences, it feels like they're imagining it, and therefore it feels like it's not real. Here's the key to that. You are imagining it. Does not mean it's not real. It's the mechanism in your brain that uses psychic experience and out-of-body techniques is the exact same mechanism that we use to create things in our mind. The difference is we're not creating this. Sometimes it feels like you're creating it. And therefore, this isn't really happening. But this is the same mechanism. So allow yourself to have this other experience and to experience what's going on and realize that it is real, even though it feels like it's completely false. It isn't. Some of you look perplexed. You have a question?
No.
Okay. Any questions so far?
I think it sounds exciting.
Okay. Let me see. We had the class on healing quite some time ago, and I'm not sure, I wasn't present in that particular class, whether or not the concept of distance healing was talked about. Excuse me. Distance healing is utilizing another form of out of body, where all you send is your sense of touch. You are on the phone with someone and you go out of body to send healing to that person. It is a form of out of body. Let me see. Another very important thing to think about when you're going out of body is, especially when you are quite used to doing these things, and this is something that as I take you through the technique that you'll notice is very important, is, and this is probably something I should talk about right now. I'm not sure if this has been mentioned in the class previously. We have two different mechanisms in our mind that we operate with, both consciously and psychically, and that is the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And it's the unconscious mind that is the enabler for things psychic. It is aware of all sorts of different pieces of information, but it's poorly organized. It's got the information. It isn't aware of how to give that information to you. The conscious mind has two main functions. First, it's the captain of the ship. It makes all the decisions. So it is the one that is in charge of the entire operation, conscious mind and all functions of the conscious mind. The second function of the conscious mind is to focus. While I'm talking to you, you're aware of my voice. You're probably aware of the things behind me. You can see them. You're probably not aware of your left little toe. You are all probably now because I mentioned it. But your unconscious mind is aware of it, but you aren't consciously aware of it because you're not focusing on it. When you're going out of body, most of the information you're getting is coming from the unconscious mind. It's poorly organized. It's fuzzy. It's not automatic to focus on something. You have to consciously focus on something to make it non-fuzzy. So as I work with this person, I'm going to be asking a lot of direct questions, looking for pieces of information, pieces of specific information that draw their focus from this piece to this piece to this piece to this piece to start to cement that reality around them. And as you're doing this, it's very important that you do the same thing. Like I said, we're not used to consciously focusing. We just turn around, we hear something, and we turn over there, and suddenly we're aware of everything that's going on over there. It doesn't happen automatically. We have to consciously focus our awareness at different pieces to start to cement that reality. That being said, a lot of the people that write about out of body, I'll give you an example. There's this one guy, I forget the guy's name. Jerry Rick. She's wrote the book. This one guy was talking about his experiences out of body. And he did a couple of different things. I might as well take the opportunity to talk about what he was doing. He went out of body and he decided to go next door and to spy on his neighbors. And he wrote down when he was done that he went next door, he saw his neighbor sitting around the kitchen table playing cards with big giant cards. And he thought, well, this is kind of odd. And later, he went and talked to the people that he was dealing with and asked them what was going on. At that particular time, everybody was sitting around the table and they were distributing that day's mail. So it was, once again, it was one of those things where it's kind of fuzzy and it's very easy to make incorrect conclusions to about what you're seeing. So it's very important that you do two things. You allow the information to come, you start to focus, but much unlike when we were working with psychometry, it was up to you to draw conclusions, is keep a bit more of an open mind. Allow things to shift a little bit, but still focus and allow things to become more real as you're working on it. Another thing that this guy did, and it is not something that we recommend, is he found it a great deal of fun to go and almost possess another person when he was out of body. He decided to go to this other place. He found this guy's family, and he decided to take over this guy. And he thought, well, what a real turkey. What a real nut job I decided to do this to. Because, after a while, the guy had a family, children, a good job, and after a few months of him doing this, he had gotten fired, he had lost his family, and his wife and kids had moved out. And this guy never realized that this poor guy that he's been doing this to, he's been driving him nuts. Because he was, oh my God, there's this other thing in my head. So, be very, very careful about what you're doing. If you're going out of body and you want to experience what somebody else is experiencing, in your mind's eye, even though you really don't have any hands, to allow your sense of touch of your hand to touch this person on the shoulder. It's a non-invasive way of experiencing what they're experiencing. The interesting thing is that when you're doing this, you'll suddenly find that you understand different languages. Because if you're watching these people, they'll be having a conversation in a language that you understand. You touch this person on the shoulder, and suddenly you can understand their languages that they can understand. Conversations make sense to you.
Drue, you might want to point out with the guy that went out and did all the screwy things. He's very well, I don't remember the name either, but he's very well thought of, that's put out there to be, this is one of the answers to out of body. And there's very few people that realize just how screwy this guy was. He was something about, he thought he had to screw himself in and out of his body and all the contortions he had to go.
The technique he was espousing was one of a torture of, I have to just work and push and get myself out of my body. And it was this horrible experience. And it was, it was probably very dramatic, but it wasn't that necessary.
It was the same one that he got out and got lost. He couldn't figure out how to get back, so he kept going in the same direction rather than just turning around and going back. Yeah. So just because somebody writes a book, it's good information, but it doesn't mean they really know what they're talking about.
With the technique that we're teaching tonight, it is physically impossible to get lost because your center is still here. So all you have to do is start to shrink a little bit instead of expand. So it's very, 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 very difficult to get lost. And once again, as you become more adept and more comfortable with going out of body, the process of expanding your awareness isn't as necessary. It can be helpful, but many times you can just say, okay, I want to go experience this, and you just go and you're there. Sandy.
You make sure you're in a place that you won't fall over.
That's good. Well, even then, I mean, at a certain point, you're comfortable with it. You can. It's easy. People, I have to back up a little bit because it's very easy to have those two different perceptions at the same time. Once you're used to it, the problem is that you find that you're able to do that in different situations. Like, I'll give you an example. Many times, we're sitting here reading. And maybe you may have experienced this, and just for giggles, you might want to go out and try this. I would recommend that you do this someplace safe. But you're sitting there, you're focusing on something. Like, say, for instance, I'm focusing on this number 5, but my awareness is on the word 2 lines above it, and it's odd. Especially if you try doing this when you're on the highway. And many times we do this and we don't realize it. We're consciously focusing on one thing, and our actual awareness is someplace completely different. Or it's really easy to do this on the highway because things are moving. So you can focus your attention on some point ahead of you, like a car. It's relatively constant, it's fixed. But your awareness is focusing on something that's moving. And as these things diverge, it does really funky things to your mind. But, just little games to play with yourself, if you feel so inclined. It's fun. It's strange, but it's fun.
One of the techniques that I was discovering was to focus in making a determination where you're going to go ahead of time. Go to some place that you go to on a regular basis, like a grocery store or an office or someplace like that. Someplace where you're familiar if you're not there. So, for example, you're familiar with this room here. You can visit this room remotely from some other location. This gives you an idea of how well you're doing because you're already familiar with the surroundings. Then it allows you to build.
Very good.
Something you've ever heard of?
No, but it sounds interesting.
A number of the manuals I've been reading recently indicate it's a very good way
Manuals?
of doing OBE.
Let's see. Questions? Comments? I will hand this up. This is interesting. The actual content of this document has little to do with the class other than it is information that is acquired by using an out-of-body technique. Jerry's husband, Petra, who is now gone several years now. 2000. At this time worked for the IRS, and this was in the 70s, and he was working for the IRS. And at that time, the thought, the concept of the dawning of the age of Aquarius was a very on top of the mind metaphysical concept. And he wanted to know exactly when the convergence or when the movement from one age to the next would occur. So he went out of body, went back in time and visited the library at Alexandria and got the information from the Egyptians, came back with that information, plugged it into the IRS computers so that it could translate from the Egyptian dates to the modern dates to find out when these different age shifts would occur. And what he came back with was this. I'm sorry?
What's good?
One's good? Cited that the age of Taurus, which the Egyptians called the age of the gods, began at about 4519 BC and ended at 3075 BC. The Age of Aries began, or what the Egyptians called the Age of Beasts, occurred at the dates you can see there. The Age of Pisces, which is the Age of Jesus, or the Egyptians called the Age of Oceans. And it was interesting because if you consider the history of mankind and the names that the Egyptians gave these ages, the Age of the Gods was basically the time of the genesis of civilization, when the spirit, so to speak, played a very large part in the development of civilization. Then, once the Age of Beasts, it's still kind of a chaotic time, and the Age of Oceans began with a great amount of sweeping movement, as mass populations of people were moving from different parts of the globe. Then he said that Aquarius, or what the Egyptians called the Age of Man, began in 8 seconds after 4 a.m. Alexandria, Egypt, May 17th of 1978. Excuse me. At any rate, this is interesting, and like I said, this was information that was obtained and utilized now by using the out-of-body technique. Let me see.
I'm trying to think of maybe other stories. There was the one that they were doing something in the house. Somebody went out of body. No, that was the picture they took. That it was the one of them, and there was the
Yes.
fuzzy thing up in the corner.
That
The light
right.
that looked like a light.
Yes. This time they were doing some ghost hunting. Some people had called them because they had a spirit and they wanted to know some information about it. So they called up Jerry and Petra. They went out to these people's house, and the Polaroid cameras that they had at that time were very, very good in capturing spirit images. So they took this Polaroid, they looked at this Polaroid, and here was this glowing thing up in the corner of the room. They said, "Oh, look, there's a spirit." And Petra said, "Well, let me go out of body and go see what it is." He was out of body for a couple of seconds, and opened his eyes again and said, "It's a cobweb." Then there is also the story, and it also reiterates a point, is that it is possible to time travel using out of body. It's possible to go forward in time. However, the shorter the length of time that you move forward, the better, because time is another dimension, and it's that future point is existent now, but it's not predestined. Our collective consciousness, our collective free will and decision making are taking this blob of our reality and moving it to some point that is not predestined. It's shaped by the decisions that we're making now. So 10 minutes from now, that locus we can probably figure out pretty easily where it's going to be 10 minutes from now without too much deviation. 5 years from now, who knows what's going to be happening. The decisions that we're making now and the decisions we make 2 months from now it's a spider web of options, so that this option exists, but that not be where we're at. So going very far in the future is problematic. Going in the past is very simple because it's set, it's done. We've been there, done that. So going in the past is, if you want to check something out, is easy, except it seems to be very, very, very difficult to go back to certain certain troublesome times. It's very, very difficult to go back to the time of the Exodus, for example, to see what was really going on. There was a great deal of global catastrophe that was happening at that point. everything's kind of unstable in that particular area, so it's very difficult to go back there. Also, if you want to go back in time, please be prepared to be disappointed. Our history is written. We have studied our history. The thing is that I'm sure this is a famous quote, and I don't remember who said it, but the history of happenings are written by the winners. If you've got a battle and the people are defeated, the people who won wrote what happened. It might not be anywhere close to what really happened, but it's what we've got now.
You can only perceive or see what's there and what we understand of our perception today. In other words, you're going to take back with it. So it's like the cards. You can only do what
yes,
you can.
But you're not going to impose something that isn't there.
No, you're not going to impose it, but you can only see it with.
You'll see it, and you're going to go say, for instance, I'll go back to the time of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So you go back to the Philadelphia in 1776, July 4th, and nothing's going on. Because it didn't happen in Philadelphia. It happened 3 days later.
Over a period of several days, actually.
Yeah. So, and that's just one example. So if you're going back to some place specific, please be prepared to allow yourself to travel around and back and forth in time a little bit, because things might not be as they're recorded.
Well, I was thinking more along the line, if somebody ran through here and ran in one door and ran out the other door, every one of us will see it slightly differently. In other words, if somebody runs out the door, and you ask them, what do they see? Somebody will see the coat, somebody will see the hat, somebody will see that he didn't have shoes on.
Sure.
You're taking your own perception with you. So you can still only look at the scene as what your own perception has, not...
Particularly when you're talking about memory.
Right.
Now, when you actually remember something, if you physically experienced an event and you want to go find more information about it, going out of body can be helpful, though it's often problematic because we do have memories that are difficult to overcome when we're doing that. It might be easy to impose our own perception of what happened to that particular event. Like Linda said, it's very easy to, as someone runs through the room, we would all focus on a different piece of detail about that person, and we wouldn't have time to focus on other pieces of detail because the time was so short, and we would all choose a different piece to focus on. And that happens at the same time, even if we've got more time to do it with, we're not going to pick up every piece of it. And if something truly happened differently, we might see that it happened differently. We might truly experience that things were not as we saw them. As long as we go back and we're prepared to accept that our memory and our perception can be faulty, then we'll be in good shape. And it's very easy to do that. But if you're not so prepared to admit that you might be wrong, and in a lot of cases you probably are, that you don't have every piece of information, even though you think you do, then you're going to have a less than rewarding experience. There was something else I was going to say. The entire train of conversation was brought about because I was talking about going very short distances in time. This one particular person wanted to demonstrate going forward in time to do healing. So this one particular person had a headache and said there was another person that was present that could see auras. Said, okay, I'm going to go out of body, go forward in time 10 minutes, heal this person's headache, and 10 minutes from now you guys can see what's going on. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, all of a sudden the people could see auras, saw this glow, this corporeal glow, and the person's headache went away. Short jaunts like that in the future, 10 minutes, like I said, are much easier to accomplish because the paths don't diverge very much. So it's easy to go to a particular place. Much further in the future, it grows exponentially as you go forward. Maybe geometrically. No, it's exponentially. 2 times 4 times 16 times Okay, 24, 64. Questions?
No, just you.
In that last story, was it the same technique that you're going to show us or talk about?
No.
Okay.
No. Like I said, and this is something that's true of almost everything that we teach in this class, and it's probably things that you've already learned in your lives now, is that you might read something and there's this technique of doing this, and there's this technique of doing this, and they're all accomplishing the same goal, but they're going about it different ways. If you get down to the basics, it's the same thing that's going on, just a different way of looking at it, a different way of using the tools that we have available to us. There's always a basic building block. And our intent in these classes is to teach you guys the basic building block. It feels like kindergarten. It feels like training wheels. But getting a firm grasp in that base allows you to take and apply advanced concepts to them and understand them rather than just doing them and saying, oh, I've got this technique. It's the best technique there is. Your technique is wrong. It allows you to understand that most techniques of accomplishing the same thing are using the same mechanisms, just different ways of going about it, different ways of looking at it. So we want everyone to become masters. But that's up to you, ultimately. Oh my gosh, I managed to sit up here and get up for 45 minutes.
We're proud of you, Drew.
Let's see. More questions?
Definite stretch.
Okay, why don't we take a break, because I definitely have to stop and get a drink of water. Did I have a volunteer? Paul. Paul,